Shana Tavot, everyone. It's an honor and pleasure to be able to say a few words as we come from the holiday season. We just concluded Simchas Torah yesterday, which itself was the conclusion of a very rich and saturated month of holidays, the month of Tishrei, beginning with Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and the 7 days of Sukkot accelerating until Shmini Atzeret, and finally concluding with the climax and the ultimate, the peak of the holiday season, Simchas Torah. So it's worthwhile to say a few words and to discuss what is this power of the holiday season and how it can empower us individually as we begin a new year. You know, we all surely pray for and are blessed with all the needs, materially and spiritually, that we require for living the best possible lives. No question, God will answer everybody's prayers. But nevertheless, as we all know, it's very easy to just gravitate. That's not even easy. Automatically we gravitate back to our natural routines. And the challenge we have is, can we use this holiday season in a way to redefine, to renew, to reinvigorate our lives on the daily basis in the details? You know, they say God is in the details. Some say the devil is in the details. We don't really believe in the devil. But it's really all about the details. You begin with the big picture. But what is our doing, our undoing, will always be in the details. So now, as we discuss how to integrate it in our daily lives, we wonder how these holidays can really empower us. It's one thing to be inspired. As I often mention, it's another to maintain inspiration. Maintenance contracts are far more expensive, far more difficult to secure than to have the initial inspiration. So I want to pause upon one reality that is lately going on in the news. Well, it's not so lately, it's been going on for over 100 years, but it's dominated the news over the past years, and that's all about the Arab Spring, the Arab rage. Some call the spring has turned into a winter. You know, the fact of the matter is the Middle East is a fermenting hotspot of activity, causing a lot of anguish. Europe, the Western world. And I'm talking about everything, from issues dealing with Iran. Before that, it was Iraq, Saudi Arabia, our relationship with oil, our romance with oil, our addiction to oil, and the Middle Eastern region. And of course, for all of us, especially Jews, Israel, smack in the middle of this Middle East. But you'll hear constantly this issue of Arab rage. A few years ago, it was about the caricatures of their prophet, how they were protesting the blasphemy and the insult to their religion. Recently, it's been about some other episode where somebody made fun of one of their religious symbols. And it constantly keeps popping up its ugly head, this issue of Arab rage. The rage you see when they take to the streets, rage against Israel, you know, with such zealousness. You know, there's an extremism, of fundamental Islam that has lately captured our lives. We all know about September 11th. Now, I'm not here to bash or to endorse any religion. I'm not here to talk about Muslims' fringe elements or extreme elements and however one wants to define whether all the Muslims in the world are in a jihad and a holy war. I don't believe so. But however you determine that, there's much to be learned from this rage, because I, as a Jew, and I speak now coming for day after Simchas Torah, I hear about this rage and I wonder to myself, we Jews have been at the brunt and at the receiving end of plenty of insults and plenty of persecution, and not just insults. We've been massacred. Just 70 years ago, a third of our nation was decimated. Let's go back to pogroms, the Inquisition, the Cossacks, the Crusades, the Middle Ages. Wherever we've been, not only have we been mocked, we have been actually annihilated. And what is our approach? What is our attitude? We hear the stories of how Jews, even in the Holocaust, the Kloisenberger Rebbe, who was being tortured specifically because he was trusted by the Jews. So he was being tortured by the Nazis, and after being beat up one night, he comes back to the barracks, and the Jews thought, what can we do for you? And he says, let's dance. They say, why are we dancing? You just were still tortured. Let's rest. He says, it's Simchas Torah. Help me dance. Where does this power come from? that the Jews dance, even at the abyss, even in the worst possible circumstances. And what do we do with our rage? So it's quite laughing, actually, quite comic to compare the two. When you look at what has happened to the Jewish people and how our religion was not just caricatured by the Nazis and by so many others. All these different, the protocols of the elders of Zion, Shylock, you name it, but we've actually been at the stake. We've been burned at the stake for it. And what has happened with our feelings? Don't we have the right to be outraged? To take vengeance? Just to throw, to thicken the plot and to throw more oil on the fire. Look at what happened after World War II. Historically, every nation that was destroyed, that was abused, that was raped, that was pillaged by another nation, when they came to power, that previous victim, they victimized their perpetrators. They victimized those that victimized them. And the first thing was vengeance. The Jewish people, what happened after World War II? After we have a country today, with a powerful army, did anyone suggest we should go bomb Germany? We should bomb the European countries that were either directly complicit in the Holocaust or they were silent? Do we bomb their cafes? Where do we take all that blood-boiling rage that we have? What we've done is we built a country, we built nations, we built industries. So how do you explain this distinction between their rage and our celebration? Are we wired differently? What is it? And I believe that if we address the root core of this, there's tremendous lessons to be learned from the holiday season, and lessons to be learned that we can apply to our personal lives, that can help us in this daily struggle of how to become greater people and how not to become overcome by our own habits and routines and patterns, and that the status quo of the monotony of existence. So let's take Simchas Torah as an example. Simchas Torah, we celebrate, we dance. The Kloisenberger Rebbe wanted to dance when he was being tortured. Dance. We dance with a rolled up Torah scroll, it's wrapped up, and we dance the night away. What is this about the Torah scroll that we're dancing with? Why are we celebrating? Well, we're celebrating, you can say it's just a book. It's a Torah scroll. But Jews have been dancing with this Torah scroll, and we call it Chayenu v'Erechmenu, our life and our sustenance. Indeed, over the years, thank God not today, when a synagogue was tragically kindled, lit up, not in a positive way, by our enemies, burning down synagogues, we would run into these burning synagogues to make sure to save not just the lives inside the building, there's Torah scrolls. Put ourselves at risk to save a Torah scroll. Why? What is this about the Torah scroll that we so connected with, that we treat it like a life? And the answer, my friends, is because it is a life. As I mentioned, Chayenu v'Erechmenu, Jews never saw the Torah as a book. They didn't see it as a book of inspiration. What would you think if you saw a group of Aristotelian scholars suddenly dancing around with Aristotle's Politics, or another one of his books, or Shakespearean poets dancing around with Shakespeare's Hamlet or Macbeth, or for that matter, any group of community dancing and celebrating with their books and literature? You don't find that. Because literature is literature, intellectual is intellectual, poetry is poetry, but the Torah for Jews was never that alone. It was always a book of life, Torah's Chaim. It means they saw the Torah as an indispensable part of their lives because it gave them guidance to life. So living in a world, in a dark world, without guidance, is like driving on a road without headlights. So they didn't see the Torah just as another book. They saw it as a life. And we celebrate because the Torah connects us to something that is beyond us and that's eternal. Solomon Rushdie, in commenting on Arab rage, he put it this way. He says, the Arab and Muslim world that find themselves, they have an identity crisis. They identify themselves by those that mock them. They identify themselves by those that abuse them. So it's interesting. Jews identify themselves by what we love, not by what we hate. Those that rage identify themselves by what they hate. What is the distinction between the two? And let's apply it to ourselves personally in our psychological lives. If you identify yourself by what another person is doing to you, so if they're doing good things to you, okay, you're feeling very good that moment. But if they're doing bad things to you, you feel terrible. That means you're at the whim of others, and that your mood and your attitude to life is based on how others treat you. This can be strangers, it can be family members, it can be parents. The key thing to any healing, to any growth, is that you are no one's victim. You're not a product of anybody's life. You're not a result of circumstances. You are an independent individual created by God. Yes, in the early years we're dependent on nurturing and love and support and the building of our self-esteem and our parents and those around close ones. But you are fundamentally an independent individual. And never ever should you define yourself by others moods, by others' likes, or by others' dislikes. Those that rage is because they don't have something inside of them to celebrate. So they define themselves as those that mock them, those that blasphemize them, those that insult them. Jews never identify themselves, not by those that admired us, and not by those that hated us. In the beginning of the chapter of Lech Lecha, which we'll be reading in a few weeks, God says to Abraham, "And you shall be a blessing unto nations. Those that bless you shall be blessed, and those that curse you shall be cursed." Think about that statement. It's not that the Jews are just a blessing. It means that they generate. They don't absorb, they generate. They generate blessings unto others. They're not only are they not defined by others, they help define the standard. This is the sign of a true leader. This is the sign of a truly internal confident person. When we dance on Simchas Torah with the Torah scrolls, the statement we're making here is, you know what we love? We love the wisdom. We love the blueprint. We love the desire. We love the plan that God gave us, which is this Torah. The Torah embodies the godliness and the godly and divine design in my life, in existence. And that's what I dance with. When you have something so powerful to connect to, it is a tree of life for those that hold on to it. We grasp those Torah scrolls and the arms of the Torah scrolls, the wooden arms, Eitz Chaim, the tree of life. Then you have something you're celebrating with. So what dominates your life is what you love, not what you hate. If you don't have something powerful to hold on to that is eternal, then what will define you? What will define you is whatever comes your way. And if it's hatred that comes your way, then you become a product of that. You hate and you rage. For Jews, the greatest revenge after World War II was not to bomb anyone, was to celebrate their lives, to bring children into the world, to bring Judaism into the world. You go to Berlin today, and you'll see little Jewish children running around. You go to the big plaza where Hitler Yamach Shemay once stood and had his legions of Jugendrat, of the young Nazis, hundreds of thousands of them, and you see a Hanukkah menorah, Hanukkah being lit in that square. That's our vengeance. The vengeance is that we celebrate light, we celebrate love. And that's what defines us, not what we hate, but what we have suffered greatly, but we're not sufferers. We've been hated, but we're not products of their hate. And that's why you have that story, that very moving story also in the Holocaust, where a barbaric Nazi who was a particular angry and very sadistic individual, if you can call him that, was about to shoot a Jew. And the Jew says to him, "May I say something before you kill me?" "Yes." And the Jew begins to mumble something quietly. And the Nazi soldier gets very angry and says, "What are you mumbling?" He says, "I'm praying to my God. I'm thanking him." "You're thanking your God?" As King David says, "Where is your God? Look at you. You're a miserable wretch. I'm about to kill you. You're at my mercy. What are you thanking your God for?" She says, "I'm thanking my God that he didn't create me like you." So you see, there's a way of celebrating life, even under the worst circumstances, and there's a way of celebrating death. And if you look at the Muslim world, you also find that. Where's the celebration of death? The suicide, in order to go to heaven. That means you kill yourself in order to go to heaven. But your life is a sacred life. I would tell this to my Muslim friends. I say, your life is sacred. God gave it to you. Why don't you live up to your greatest potential? Why are you giving it away? But it comes from the same thing. If you don't define yourself by what you are, you begin to define yourself by what others say about you. And if it's negative stuff, it usually has more impact on you than positive stuff. You know, they say that statistics show that one compliment does not counteract one insult. You need 3 compliments or 4 compliments to get rid of the sting or the pain that we feel when we're insulted. Is that due to the fact that our status quo, our natural state is insecure? So therefore when we hear an insult that just feeds into us and we need a lot more to compensate because we don't feel that positive about ourselves? Or some other theory? However you explain it. But the bottom line is that when a person defines him, does not have that secure, solid place that connects them to something eternal, you are then subject to the whims and the vicissitudes of the winds of life. The winds of war, the winds of life, the battles of life. And that is what the holiday season is all about. Rosh Hashanah, in the way of its renewal. Yom Kippur, the sanctity, the hope. Rosh Hashanah is our birth, and telling us that you have fresh, new beginning. Yom Kippur is the birth of hope, with Moses coming down from the mountain. Telling us that Salachti Kidvarecha, the God said, I've forgiven as you've asked me to. That Moses was able to prevail, that even though the Jews had betrayed, had broken something, you can repair it. The message of hope. And then Sukkot, the message of joy, culminating with Simchas Torah, dancing with the Torah. So fundamentally, they're all one essence. The connection to something that is beyond us. On Rosh Hashanah, we call it crowning the king. Connecting to a king that is beyond a human king. Yom Kippur is the sanctity of separating ourselves as much as possible from the material world, accessing the depths of our inner soul, realizing that there's hope possible under all circumstances. Sukkot, the celebration of what? Not because we made money, not because we bought new properties, not because we've gotten married, not for any particular personal reason. You celebrate the celebration of the divine. Zman Simchasenu means the time of our rejoicing. Who is us? Obviously, our can be us as a community, the Jewish community, but our is also said, our joy and God's joy. Yismach Yisrael ba'esav. And Yismach Hashem b'maisav. Jews celebrate ba'esav with the one that made them, their maker, their creator. And Yismach Hashem, and God celebrates b'maisav with his products. So it's a double joy of something that is divine. It's not just another joy. We have many joys through the year, and hopefully for many good occasions. We have bar mitzvahs, we have births, we have weddings, we have anniversaries, we have graduations, we have new jobs. As I said, people succeed in different areas. They pop champagne, but on Sukkot we celebrate the divine celebration. So all 3 holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, is all about the connection to something that is beyond the individual. Beyond our individual experience. And that is the power of the holiday season. It allows us to connect to something that is not man-made. And Simchas Torah. We don't even use our minds. We take the Torah scrolls as they're wrapped up. We join our neighbor. Doesn't matter whether they're the same class and distinction, the same scholarship. And we join and dance together in an unfettered joy. So it was Rabbi Kleisenberg, the Rebbe of Kleisenberg, when he said, let us dance that night, he wasn't being insane. He wasn't being fanatic. He was saying, I'm weak, my body has been beat up. We're here in the Holocaust, we're here under the worst possible circumstances in the darkness. But where are we going to get strength to get out of this? We're not more powerful than the Nazis are physically, but our power is in our spirit. I want to dance Simchas Torah because I want to connect to something that is beyond the human. That was the point. And that is why Jews ran into a burning synagogue building in order to save a Torah scroll. For them, it was the connection to eternity. My Torah scroll burns, I burn. Which explains also why Jews were ready over the centuries to give their own lives and leave their wives as widows and their children as orphans. Why not just bow to the stupid idol, or compromise your values? How could you be irresponsible and leave your children and your family alone? Because they knew that if they give up their faith, they're giving up their lifeline. So they may give their children and families a husband and a father physically, but he's dead spiritually. And they always knew the goal is to maintain this eternal chain. So the holiday season is a very powerful season because it's a connection to eternity. It's a connection to what we and our ancestors have been doing for thousands of years, and in an unbroken chain, and it's a connection to that which is not human. As a result, it gives us the power to identify ourselves by that. I would submit that this is a profound psychological foundation, that if it was infused in every one of our education, ourselves, our children, and I say this across the board, universally, Jew and non-Jew, this would dramatically change the world in which we live. Because the identity that people have today is based on all kinds of impermanent things, what others value. Money, of course, is a big one. Other status symbols, what you wear, what you drive, where you travel to, who you hang out with, what you watch, what you read. But that sense of inner identity, who are you, generating from within, is sorely lacking. Now, all children are born with that potential, because they were created in the divine image, given an indispensable mission to fulfill in this world. But then they are forced to become adults. They start playing the game by the rules of adults. And we all become defined by what others expect and what we think is success. And so what happens is, we may not be defining ourselves by those that hate us, but we're defining ourselves by others. And if they hate us, that becomes part of our identity too. So I would thank, in a strange, bizarre way, our Muslim friends who are outraged, because it teaches us what not to be like. Why are you outraged? Why don't you celebrate what you stand for? Why is your most passionate moments we see is only when you're angry at somebody else? Where's your passion when there's nobody inciting you? What do you stand for? And this question is asked to each of us. The Jewish people have this question too. One of the big questions I ask, young people ask, is I've had enough of being defined by being an anti-Semite. And I ask my parents or I ask my educators, who are we? What do we stand for? Well, we're against racism. We're against discrimination. We're against anti-Semitism. That's an anti-Semite. And someone asks you, what do you stand for? Who are you? That's a far harder question to answer. Because we as Jews for the last several thousand years have been persecuted, and many of us have developed a certain type of defensive mentality. And it's far harder to play offense than defense. We're survivors. You know that joke they tell about the Jew gets up in the Knesset and says, I have a solution for all our problems. Instead of fighting with the Arabs, let's attack the United States of America. They'll beat us. And then out of guilt, they'll rebuild us and become a superpower like Germany and Japan after World War II. Old Jew gets up in the back and says, very, very nice idea. But what happens if we win? We Jews win, which is most likely what happen, knowing our mazel, our luck. In other words, it's very good to fight defense. We are very good defense. No one's better than the Jewish people. We've survived it all. Nobody can annihilate us, thank God. Though they've tried, and how they've tried. But now we have a new situation. We have the comfort. We have the freedom, which is a great blessing. It's much harder to define what do you stand for now. Now that you have this freedom, what is it that you stand for? What is it the driving force? What is your identity? So we come Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah today, not like in the Holocaust. In the Holocaust, the Kloisenberger Rebbe and the other Jews understood its power. Today its power is to tell us, identify yourself by your eternal values. Not by anything that is superficial, anything that's temporary, anything defined by human beings as valuable, by the eternal values. Because that is, when you are defining yourself by that, then you are not then vulnerable and a victim and a product of other people's definitions. Money, of course, is the great antithesis to all of this, because money gives the illusion of power. It gives the illusion of power. People with money can buy anything. They can buy anyone. And it becomes such a distracting force that it can completely sugarcoat and cover up any other needs a person has. There are people who are miserable people, dysfunctional, but give them money, and the money can become an amusement park. They can purchase anything. They can keep themselves busy counting their money having money make money, buying things with that money, basically self-medicating, numbing themselves. That doesn't mean money is a curse. That doesn't mean money is a negative thing. It means that we don't have an identity, that any force that seems powerful is going to define you. Which is why so many people define their self-value by their net value. That's just one example. Many other factors is what define people outside of themselves. And what Simchas Torah is teaching us, define yourself by what you love, not by what you hate. Don't let others, the ones that hate you, define you. Your identity should not be defined by those that mock and insult you, but by who you stand, what you stand for. And this is the key element in understanding the high holiday season. I remember after my book was published, Toward a Meaningful Life, the second time around in 2001. So I was interviewed. I had an interview scheduled actually for it was Erev Yom Kippur, the day before Yom Kippur. I don't remember the English date, but it happened to be that morning O.J. Simpson was acquitted for murdering his wife. If you recall, the glove doesn't fit, you got to acquit. The jingle that won them the case. Everyone in America knew he was guilty. Later he was proven guilty in civil court, and so on. But bottom line, he was acquitted. So I got a call from the producer of the show that morning. I believe it was maybe a Sunday morning. And she tells me, your book is a great book. We'd love to do an interview with you. But today the dominating headlines is O.J. Simpson's case. So if you don't mind, let's push off your interview. We'll do it another time. Whatever, something inside of me said to her, it got me to say to her, look, we can talk about O.J. Simpson. I think my book has some of the solutions to the divide, the racial divide that case conjured up. If you remember, in black schools across the country, they were celebrating that day as if they won a great victory. The whites saw this as a complete travesty of justice. But I feel I can discuss something that will really be helpful regarding the issues of this case. She says, if you're ready to talk about the case and your book has a connection, great. Now, I have no clue, mind you, what connection it has. But I just felt, this is an opportunity. It's Erev Yom Kippur, a little Jewish chutzpah. Let's talk about it. And I'd come up with something. Anyway, the interview was scheduled around 11 o'clock in the morning. And we went on. It was an interview, I believe it was in Miami, Florida. But it had national reach, based in Miami. So we got on the interview, and the interviewer says to me, that read your book. It's a very nice book. But today we have the breaking news of the O.J. Simpson acquittal, and we'd like to know what your opinion on that matter is. So I said, I'd like to quote a story from Toward a Meaningful Life, but before I do so, let me tell you something. Even though the dominating headlines today is O.J. Simpson, the fact is I'd like to share that the Jewish world, for them it's Erev Yom Kippur now. It's the day before Yom Kippur, the day before the holiest day of the year. And traditional communities, you're going to see them, most of them don't even know that O.J. Simpson was acquitted. They're running around, bustling, going to the mikveh for the ritual bath, praying, atoning, asking for forgiveness, preparing for this great solemn day called Yom Kippur. So while we speak, there's a whole community that is oblivious to all this that is dominating the headlines. And you may think they're detached. What's the matter with these Jews? What's happening now is O.J. Simpson is acquitted. What more important than that can be happening? So let me share the following story. Lev Yitzchak Bardishev, the great Lev Yitzchak Bardishev, prayed Yom Kippur. He led the prayer service. And he got up and he stood by the Amud, which is the stand by which the cantor begins the prayers. And he said the following. The king of Prussia, the Prussian people say that their king is the greatest. The French say that their emperor is the greatest. The Russians say that their czar is the greatest. And I, Levi Yitzchak ben Sarah Shosha, which was his name and his mother's name, Levi Yitzchak, the son of Sarah Shosha, say, Yiskadal v'yiskada shmei Rabbi. May the name of God, the great name of God, be exalted and elevated and ascend on high. That's what he said. What is the meaning of the story? It means, while the world is busy, the Prussians with their king, the French with their emperor, the Russians with their czar, Americans with their headlines, including O.J. Simpson's acquittal, there's something greater than it all. There's a divine force that transcends all these elements and will outlive them and has been here long before they all existed. And that's the secret to all greatness. Yes, it's news, and we'll talk about the news. But we have to remember that there's a group of people that today are making the statement, these things are not what matters. These are the small shifts that take place in news shifts from day to day that constantly change. Every generation, every day has its headlines. But what remains steady, the foundation that defines us, is not the events that happen in our lives. Just like those who mock us or those who love us don't define our identities. Our identities are not defined by the circumstances and events that are going on around us. And that's why today they say Yom Kippur, oblivious of all of this. And this, mind you, I said to the interviewer, on the phone interview it was, the radio interview, is the secret to the problems, to solve the problems, the racial problems we're having. And here's where I'd like to cite the story from Torah Meaningful Life. In the chapter on love, there's the story in 1991, the summer of 91, there was a pogrom in Crown Heights. You may recall that when the Lubavitcher Rebbe returned from his gravesite, from visiting the gravesite of his father-in-law, so his entourage accidentally and tragically killed a little boy, Gavin Cato, a little black boy. The blacks, someone inciting them, took to the streets. And that night, in cold blood, killed a Jew, Yankel Rosenbaum. It wasn't exactly the same thing. This was premeditated, malicious. This was an accident, tragic accident. And that night was a night of lawless night. I remember it vividly. They took to the streets, breaking windows like a pogrom in the times of Germany in the late 30s, 1930s. And they killed this Jew in cold blood. They stabbed him to death on the corner. Mayor Dinkins then, the black mayor of New York, came to see the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he asked for a prayer and a blessing that there should be peace among the two peoples. And the Rebbe's response is, which I have in the book, The Torah Meaningful Life, not two people, one people, under one God. That was the Rebbe's answer. The Rebbe didn't distinguish between the two. We're all human beings under one God. What is that telling us? This divide, this hatred, why the blacks look at the whites with distrust and the whites look at the blacks with distrust, is because they don't respect the divine image in each one of us. How was O.J. Simpson able to murder someone? It's because he did not respect the divine image in that person. In his convenience, his rage, he got angry. In his rage, it was rage. This linebacker was an angry man. You define yourself by what happens to you and by what others have done to you, you can end up becoming the worst murderer. When you define yourself by racial politics, by the color of our skin, by other distinctions, there can be great distrust and hatred. You want a solution? One people under one God. Yes, we're diverse. Jews are Jews, there are non-Jews. There are blacks, there are whites. There are Asians and there are Europeans and there are Middle Eastern, there are Africans and so on. Whereas diverse is 7 billion people on this planet. There are 7 billion different images, different personalities. But we're also part of one large organism, one God. And that's what connects us. And when we're connected and celebrate with that, like an equalizer, like we do Simchas Torah, everybody dances equally, from child to adult, from scholar to layperson. That connects us to the eternal. And that is the response that I would like to share. I told her about the O.J. Simpson. I have to tell you, she was very moved, and she says this was excellent. Because most people are going to be talking, is he guilty, is he not guilty? You're giving us a perspective that is beyond just the immediate guilt or not guilt. The issues at hand, the root of the issues. So as we come from the holiday season, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we have to remember Yiskadl v'Yiskadl Shmei Rabbi. We have to remember where we put our priorities. Where is greatness? Where's the domain of greatness? So when we talk about all these prayers that we went through Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and there are many, and many people wonder, what is this repetition seemingly? It's really different ways of expressing the main theme, which is It doesn't begin with man-made, you and me. It begins with something greater than us all. And when you connect to that thing that's greater, that itself gives you eternal power. And that's why we dance and we celebrate. And that's why we have the power to dance and celebrate. Today, in our personal lives, there's an epidemic of insecurity, of fears. Interestingly, in a world where at the press of a button you can get almost anything. Anything, anywhere, anytime. We don't have to struggle as our ancestors did, as our grandparents did for many things. Yes, we have our challenges and there's our recessions, but the problems of our free time, our leisure, our boredom, the addictions, the numbing ourselves to reality is unprecedented. Because I would submit that our identities today are under attack. Who are you? Who am I? How do I define myself? You go to work one day and someone says something really bad to you and it can destroy your whole day. We define ourselves by our jobs, by being fired. Now, none of this is pleasant, these negative things, but does that define you? And that, I would submit, is the reason for that is because we don't have another definition. When you have no other definition of yourself, so what's left? What others give you? What others define you as? So the high holiday season has a tremendous lesson in identity politics, in identity issues. Who are we and what do we define ourselves by? So I would suggest that we take that message of Simchas Torah, of the Sukkos, of Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and channel it into a daily exercise, into a daily activity. Define yourself. What do you stand for? Even try to ask yourself that question. Write it down on a piece of paper. Answer. What do you stand for? What I stand for, I identify myself by. You'll find it not easy. It may even be unpleasant initially. But the more you focus on that, the more you'll free yourself by the other IDs that we have. It's not our credit score. It's not how others see us. Yes, it's good to have objective perspective from somebody else. But it's not that what defines you. What defines you is your soul, your innate and God-given gift of being an indispensable entity in this world. Most of us are not aware of that, and definitely not aware, even if we're aware that we're indispensable, what that indispensability looks like. But that's the job we have to do now. After we dance, that's what we have to do. So while they rage, we dance. While they hate, we love. While they look for other scapegoats to identify their lives, we look to the eternal that defines our essential life. And our role is not just to do it for ourselves, but to teach it to others, to make this a part of people's reality. And we have a battle at our hands, because there's a constant assault. Don't kid yourself. We're constantly under assault. Our psyches are under assault, are being violated by all those forces. Some of them seem very innocuous, very innocent. But those forces that demand our time, our energy, that demand our attention, that insist and impose themselves on us in a constant way of saying, buy this, do this, instead of that quiet little place where you can step back and say, what am I without other people's expectations? What am I without other people's standards? What am I if I have no one to answer to? Now, I'm not suggesting lack of accountability to others. I'm suggesting that every day we should have a moment. Maybe this is called the Moda'ani moment, where you just step back and think to yourself, what is it that I stand for? I believe if you start asking yourself that question, you begin to look for answers. And as you look for answers, you will find profound message within yourself that will help you identify what you're good at, what you should be doing, the light that you bring to this world. So let us make a resolution as we begin the new year that enough is enough. Enough being defined by others, enough being defined by the ambiguous or amorphous standards that no one knows who's created. Using Shakespeare, the blind leading the blind. Let us look to eternity. Let us look to the eternal Torah for sustenance, to look what defines our identities. The more you connect to that, the more you will have that ability to not allow any factors in your life to affect you. Instead, the opposite. Wherever you go, all those forces become tools, become accessories, become your so-called palette to be able to capture and express your soul's calling. Over Simchas Torah, I had the opportunity to hear an interesting story, which really was there was a Swedish, I guess he was a researcher, Gustav Eriksson, who had a spectacular bird collection in his home. One day he had to travel, so he gave the keys to his home for someone to take care of the birds to one of his friends or associates. Well, as luck would have it, they decided to leave the window open. Now these birds were not caged, so the birds all flew out the window, as you could imagine. Freedom. When Gustav Eriksson came back, he was distraught. Here he had collected all these birds, and he treated them nicely. Whether it was right or wrong to keep them in captivity is another story, but that's what he did. And he was distraught. Now they were all, what do you do? Well, he came up with a great idea. He would play music every day for these birds. And if they had a reaction to it, he would play classical music, pieces from Mozart and others. So what he did was, he blasted this music from his apartment, from his home, where he had all these birds. And lo and behold, you know what happened? Bird by bird returned to the room where they were under his captivity. The music drew them back. What does this teach us? It teaches us that music resonates. It teaches us that they say about love, that if you really love somebody, instead of holding on to them and controlling them, let them fly like a bird. And if they love you, they will return. Many people have difficulty loving in that way. They want to control what they love. They're concerned. This really comes from insecurity, because you feel that give them that freedom, independence, they won't return. But if you have the music, they will return. The same thing is with Judaism and the holiday season. These are powerful forces of music that not just that we dance and sing with, but touch the soul. Then comes, after Simchas Torah, we go out into the world. And you have the opportunity to either just forget what happened, which is often what takes place, because it doesn't resonate, or to reconnect to the music of Judaism, to the music of the Torah. The real power of holding on to the Torah and celebrating is something that touches very deep inside. So though we go afterwards and fly, when someone plays that music, we return to it. That's why in Judaism also the word tshuva, which is the 10 days of tshuva, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the first half of the high holiday season, means to return. What is return? Why not? Tshuva means, some would translate as repentance. But repentance is the antithesis of return. Repentance means that you're repenting and regretting something that you did. You're going away from it. Return means you return to something. Because you see, in Judaism, it's not about going away. The sin is not who you are. That's the aberration. You are naturally a certain music that you may have wandered away from. So you return to it, which really means what you want to do is eliminate the outer layers that distract you, so you can go back to who your true identity is. So the analogy here would be is that we as birds have a music that we respond to. But that's the key word, resonance, responding to, relevance. If it's not going to resonate, and if it's not relevant, you're not going to gravitate toward it. So that's our challenge. How do we dig deep into our souls? How do we dig deep into the holiday season and take from it the power that allows us to find our true identities? So music is a good exercise as well. Play music. Find songs that speak to your soul. And consistently, not just as an entertainment or as an escapism, putting on headset and just escaping into the world of music. But find songs that actually help empower your identity. You want to call it music therapy? Call it music therapy. But music as a tool to actually access that part of ourselves that says, that now I feel at home. Now I feel that resonates. That message resonates. And write down what you feel. when that song is played? What is it that you stand for? Not what is that you stand against. Not what others are shaping or defining, but you define yourself from within. Not by what others are saying, not by, you don't define yourself by those that hate you, you define yourself by that which you love. And that is the key thing in Judaism, the message of discovering the music within. Music is an excellent analogy because music resonates, music touches. And in that sense, each of us can definitely find that type of peace. You see, today music captures and mesmerizes, captivates all of us, especially in the Western world. Young people. You compare a rock concert has replaced cathedrals. A rock concert is a cathedral today. A song is a prayer. And people are a community. You see the passion, you see the excitement. People don't identify that with religious and religious prayers or rituals. They find it in music because the music touches them. I would have to assume those that ones that found it in God, because the God touched them the way music touches young people today. So that's our challenge. How do you find ways in spirituality to make it sound like music? And not fake it, to make it actually resonate, to touch people in that profound way. And that's when you have a religion that's not based on hatred, on death, on what others are saying about you, but it's a religion that comes from within, from your divine image, from your divine soul, is generating and communicating and connecting to yourself and to everyone around you. So I want to share my prayer and blessing that everyone in this new year, as we come from Tishrei, we conclude the month of Tishrei, and the 60 days that so many of you have been following, it should be a year where our identities emerge. In a year where your true identity, what you stand for, what you want to bring into this world, your unique music, your unique melody should sing out loud. Not as Thoreau writes, most men live lives of quiet desperation, and they die with their song still inside them. Let us resolve and let us be blessed and let God hear our requests that our song should not die within us. But we cannot die, and we cannot let our hope die, which means we need to not be resigned, we need to be motivated and know that there is an opening. That no matter what your life has been like till now, no matter what last year brought to you, whether on a financial level or other levels, your soul is throbbing inside of you, a force waiting to be released, a bird waiting to fly, based on the music that your soul generates. So may this be a year where we connect with that and apply it, channel it, harness it into our daily lives, into the things we do, even the mundane things we do. Then what they do is energize even the mundane things, even a meal, even walking down the street, commuting to your work becomes elevated and transformed when it's driven by that type of energy within. So I wish upon everyone that we should have that type of profound connection, and God should bless us all with a year of prosperity and abundance materially and spiritually, and above all with happiness and good health, in a way that we really can actualize and express ourselves in the greatest possible way, a way where we can spread our wings and truly dance and minimize anything that may cause us any discomfort or rage or any other negative feelings. So we dance and we dance and we dance, and we teach other people to dance, because life is a dance, and when you have that soul that is energizing you and you're confident, then you have plenty to dance for. So I bid everyone a good week, and we shall resume next week. Next week will be a live class and also broadcast. This week is still being broadcast alone, and I look forward to celebrating with all of you throughout this year and in many good occasions. And please stay in touch with us in every possible way, or any way we can help you. Meaningful Life Center, just go to meaningfullife.com. We have plenty of resources there, and you can feel free to contact us. We also have a weekly email list, so you can feel free to also subscribe to that. You can email us directly at wisdomreb@meaningfullife.com. So until next week, everyone should be very well, and celebrate your life. Thank you very much.